The episode of The View where Tulsi Gabbard appeared to defend herself stands out as a vivid snapshot of the show's chaotic energy. Gabbard, composed and direct, systematically dismantled the accusations thrown her way, while Joy Behar, visibly rattled, scrambled through her notes in a near panic. Behar's reaction was less about engaging with Gabbard's points and more about clinging to a narrative that was slipping through her fingers. The exchange was a microcosm of the broader issues with The View, a platform where ideological blind spots often overshadow reason, and where the host's moral posturing can feel like a performance rather than a pursuit of truth. Critics of the show, like Joe Rogan and Bill Maher, have pointed to moments like this as evidence of its intellectual shortcomings, with Rogan bluntly calling the hosts among the dumbest people on television, and Maher slicing through their hypocrisy with surgical sarcasm. Yet, the Gabbard episode was just a warm-up for the larger scandal that would engulf one of the show's stars, Sunny Hostin, and expose the fragility of the moral high ground The View so often claims. Sunny Hostin, the self-styled legal expert of the panel, found herself at the center of a storm when her husband, Dr. Emmanuel Hostin, was implicated in a $450 million fraud scandal, the largest RICO case ever filed in New York, surpassing even notorious mafia cases. The allegations paint a picture of a sophisticated scheme involving offshore accounts, shady medical billing, and a blatant disregard for IRS paperwork. Hostin, who has built her brand on delivering sharp-witted commentary on justice and ethics, was suddenly faced with a personal crisis that contradicted the image she'd cultivated. The irony was inescapable. A woman who lectures America on systemic failures and moral integrity was now linked, albeit indirectly, to a financial scandal of Wall Street proportions. While Hostin herself isn't named in the lawsuit, the proximity of the allegations to her household raised eyebrows, especially given her public persona as a legal and moral authority. Joe Rogan didn't hold back when he caught wind of the scandal. Known for his unfiltered, no-holds-barred style, Rogan tore into the situation with the intensity of a UFC fighter. He didn't just focus on the fraud itself, but zeroed in on the media's deafening silence. The View, a show that thrives on dissecting every celebrity misstep or political controversy, went mute when the scandal hit close to home. Rogan pointed out the double standard. If this had involved a conservative figure, the media would have erupted with wall-to-wall coverage, complete with dramatic graphics and breathless commentary. But because it was one of their own, the story was buried faster than a bad sitcom. Rogan's critique wasn't just about Hostin, it was about the selective outrage that protects certain elites while crucifying others. He called out the hypocrisy of media personalities who play moral arbiters until their own house is under scrutiny, then pivot to pleas for privacy or context. Bill Maher, in contrast, approached the scandal with a different but equally devastating tone. Where Rogan was a sledgehammer, Maher was a scalpel, slicing through Hostin's carefully curated image with dry wit and biting sarcasm. He didn't need to shout to make his point. His calm, almost weary delivery carried the weight of someone who's seen this kind of hypocrisy play out too many times. Maher framed Hostin's situation as a Greek tragedy, an identity crisis for a woman who'd built her career on being untouchable. The View's silence on the matter only amplified the irony. A show that prides itself on tackling tough issues couldn't muster a single segment to address a $450 million fraud case tied to one of its hosts. Maher didn't just roast Hostin, he exposed the broader pattern of elite double standards, where moral lectures are delivered with conviction until accountability comes knocking. What makes this moment particularly striking is the rare alignment between Rogan and Maher, two figures who rarely see eye to eye. Rogan, the podcasting giant who thrives on raw, unscripted debates, and Maher, the polished HBO host who wields irony like a weapon, come from different corners of the cultural landscape. Yet, on this issue, they converged with a shared sense of disbelief and mockery. Rogan's fiery takedown and Maher's cool dissection formed a one-two punch that laid bare the contradictions at the heart of The View's brand. Both men highlighted the same core issue. When media figures spend years preaching from a pedestal, they'd better ensure their own lives can withstand scrutiny. For Hostin, the scandal wasn't just a personal embarrassment, it was a professional implosion, undermining the credibility she'd spent years building. The View's handling of the scandal, or rather, its refusal to handle it, spoke volumes. The show, known for its outspoken hosts and heated debates, suddenly adopted a policy of strategic silence. No roundtable discussions, no carefully worded statements, not even a vague acknowledgement of the legal chaos swirling around Hostin's household. This wasn't just an oversight, it was a calculated move to protect one of their own. The same panel that jumps on every minor controversy with theatrical outrage couldn't find a single word to say about a fraud case that could fund a small country. The audience was left to wonder, when did accountability become optional for the daytime TV elite? The show's silence was louder than any monologue, revealing a loyalty clause that seems to shield insiders from the kind of scrutiny they eagerly apply to others. Rogan and Maher didn't just call out Hostin's personal scandal, they exposed the broader machinery of media hypocrisy. Rogan, with his bulldozer energy, lambasted the mainstream media for acting as spineless accomplices, too scared or too loyal to touch the story. He pointed out how quickly the narrative shifts when the accused is part of the elite club. If a tech mogul or a conservative politician had been tied to a similar scandal, The View would have dedicated entire episodes to dissecting it, complete with moral grandstanding and calls for justice. But when it's one of their own, the rules change. Maher, meanwhile, leaned into the absurdity of it all, painting Hostin as a tragic figure whose brand of moral superiority collapsed under the weight of her own reality. His dry chuckle carried the sting of someone who's seen this script play out before. Media stars preaching virtue until the spotlight turns on them. The View's track record doesn't help its case. The show has a history of stumbling into controversies, from Maher's flustered response to Gabbard to Hostin's own legal apologies for statements made on air. Just months before the fraud scandal broke, Hostin was forced to issue on-air retractions for comments that crossed legal lines, including a jab at uneducated white women in the context of Trump's electoral success. These moments paint a picture of a show that thrives on provocation but struggles with accountability. The hosts, particularly Hostin and Maher, often present themselves as moral and intellectual authorities, yet their reactions to pushback, whether from Gabbard or the fallout of a massive fraud case, reveal a fragility that undermines their credibility. The public's reaction to the scandal, amplified by Rogan and Maher's commentary, underscores a growing frustration with media double standards. Only 31% of Americans trust the healthcare system, a statistic that reflects broader disillusionment with institutions, including the media. The View, with its platform to shape public discourse, has a responsibility to address issues like fraud and accountability head-on, especially when they hit so close to home. Instead, the show's silence suggests a prioritization of image over integrity, a choice that only deepens public skepticism. Rogan and Maher, by contrast, leaned into the discomfort, using their platforms to say what The View wouldn't. No one is above accountability, not even the loudest voices on daytime TV. The scandal also highlights the personal toll of such public controversies. Hostin's husband, a doctor who reportedly performed surgeries for uninsured patients only to battle insurance companies for payment, now faces allegations that paint his actions in a far darker light. The accusations of fraud, offshore accounts, and RICO violations suggest a level of financial maneuvering that goes beyond mere billing disputes. For Hostin, this isn't just a legal issue, it's a personal and professional crisis that challenges the very identity she's built on The View. Her silence, while strategic, only fuels speculation and erodes the trust she's worked to cultivate with her audience. Rogan and Maher's takedowns weren't just about Hostin, they were a broader indictment of the media's selective outrage. Rogan framed it as a cautionary tale about unchecked egos in the media bubble, where personalities like Hostin can lecture on morality while ignoring the chaos in their own backyard. Maher, with his knack for cutting through pretense, turned the scandal into a case study in elite hypocrisy, where the rules apply to everyone except the anointed few. Together, they painted a picture of a media landscape that's quick to judge but slow to self-reflect, a dynamic that The View embodies with its blend of sanctimony and selective silence. The View's audience, often described as a mix of loyal fans and hate watchers, has come to expect a certain level of chaos from the show. Viral clips of the host's missteps, Maher's note scrambling, Hostin's legal backtracks, fuel a cycle of mockery and fascination. But the fraud scandal takes it to a new level, exposing not just individual failings but the structural flaws of a show that thrives on outrage while dodging accountability. Rogan and Maher, in their own ways, tapped into this sentiment, giving voice to the audience's frustration with a media elite that seems to operate by its own rules. In the end, the Hostin scandal and The View's response, or lack thereof, reveal a deeper truth about the state of public discourse. When the loudest voices in media fall silent in the face of their own controversies, it's not just hypocrisy, it's a betrayal of the trust they claim to uphold. Rogan and Maher, for all their differences, reminded us that accountability isn't optional, no matter how polished your platform or how loudly you preach. The View may continue to churn out hot takes and moral lectures, but the cracks in its facade are impossible to ignore. As the scandal unfolds, one thing is clear. The real story isn't just the $450 million fraud, it's the silence that followed, and the voices bold enough to break it.